Hey, what's going on, Who That Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And I'm going to give my final thought on the NFL Combine Day 1. As you all know, that Day 1, it focused on the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the tight ends. And I must say that I was really impressed by some of the wide receivers that I saw. And it's no surprise to any of us in the Who That Nation that the Saints need another wide receiver. You know, we've been talking about a number 2 receiver for the New Orleans Saints for the past couple years now, and there's some very credible wide receivers in this year's draft. I think a couple media and scouts said that this is the deepest wide receiver draft in years. I mean, even guys that probably going to end up going in the 3rd or the 4th round rank really high when it comes to scouts. So a couple guys that stood out to me, I'm looking at this list, and this is on NFL.com. It's talking about the guy's 40-yard dash, which is probably no surprise to anyone. Wide receiver Henry Ruggs III ran the fastest 40 time, 4.27. Only missing the record that's owned by John Ross of the Cincinnati Bengals by like zero point 0.5 seconds. So, I mean, he ran a 4.22. Henry Ruggs ran a 4.27. This guy's really high on everybody's board. I think that he improved his draft stock. Teams just love players with speed, you know, and a lot of people are comparing him to a player like Tyreek Hill, a guy that when he catches the ball, he can make people miss, and also he can go off to the races. So he really stood out. Another player that stood out was Chase Claymore out of Notre Dame. This guy's from Canada. And honestly, he came out of nowhere, man. He was one of those guys that I think ended up walking on the Notre Dame team. Wasn't really highly recruited, but all he did was really just put on a very good college campaign. He ran a 4.4, man, and that's pretty impressive when you're like around 6'3", you know, and about almost 230 pounds. So this guy was running, you know, a 4.4. That's pretty impressive. So he really stood out to me in the combine. Justin Jefferson, a person I feel like improved their draft stock. Justin Jefferson out of LSU. A lot of Saints fans want to see him in a Saints uniform. I think he did himself, you know, a lot of justice going out there running a 4.4. I mean, that was just the only question for a lot of people. You know, people knew he was good. They knew he had production in the slot. But, you know, speed was a question. And him running a 4.4, I think he improved his draft stock, you know, and being in, you know, the top 20, I think he moved himself up to about the top 15 with an impressive 40 time. We know that teams are crazy about these 40-yard dashes. So Justin Jefferson really stood out. And lastly is Antonio Gandy-Golden, the wide receiver out of Liberty, the 6'4", 222-pound wide receiver guy. All he did was make plays in college. He didn't, you know, blaze the charts or anything like that when it comes to the 40. I think he ran like maybe like almost like a 4.6. But this guy's like really productive, and I'm really impressed at what I saw, especially him coming from a small school. This is a guy that I feel like is going to end up being one of those guys that, you know, fly under the radar. But when he gets to the league, he's going to take the league by storm. Those are wide receivers that stood out to me. You know, I mean, you have the usual suspect, Jerry Jeudy and, you know, CeeDee Lamb. These two guys, I mean, everybody know that these are the two top guys at the wide receiver position coming into the NFL draft. So, I mean, there's nothing more they could have done to impress us. I mean, we already know the sky's the limit for both of these guys. And at the quarterback position, Jalen Hurts really did an outstanding job. Jalen Hurts is still a raw talent. He still has a lot of work to do when it comes to his mechanics. He needs to work on his timing. I seen a couple passes that were a little bit late. You know, he was throwing the passes to the wide receivers after they, you know, broke on their routes. You know, I mean, it wasn't within stride. I think when you throw the ball to a wide receiver, you got to make sure that you give him the ball before, you know, he gets into his cut. So as soon as he makes that cut, that ball is in his hands. And I feel like the timing of Jalen Hurts needs to, you know, get a little bit better. But nevertheless, I mean, he threw the ball really well. You know, he showed his arm strength. He ran like I think like a 4.5 in the 40. I think this guy really improved his draft stock. A lot of people were looking at him as like a 4th round draft pick, but wouldn't be surprised the way that you see people like Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson playing right now that somebody don't take a gamble on Jalen Hurts. and maybe like the second round. Also, someone that stood out to me was Justin Herbert. A lot of unanswered questions about Justin Herbert. People were wondering, like, will he be able to be a pro-style quarterback, especially the fact that he stood in the shotgun the majority of his college career. No snaps under center. So looking at him with these 7-step drops and throwing the ball down the field, you had to be impressed, man, the way he was dropping the ball into the wide receivers. So I think he started off a little bit nervous. You can tell he was nervous, in some of these drills. I guess, this is a big opportunity. It's a job interview. It's the job interview of your life. And I think once he settled down, he really showed the scouts what he was really made of. I think he really improved his draft stock. So I think it's a battle between him and Jordan Love. I think people are probably going to end up getting Justin Herbert because of, the fact that he went to Oregon. That's a bigger school than Utah State and Jordan Love. So I think that Justin Herbert really did himself a favor by having a good combine. Jordan Love, a lot of people are drooling over him. He is one of those guys that came, lurking through the shadows, kind of like Carson Wentz did. Nobody really knew anything about Carson Wentz coming out of North Dakota State. It's the same thing with Jordan Love. People are comparing him to Patrick Mahomes as far as arm talent and arm strength. But I look at him as being one of those third quarterbacks, maybe even fourth quarterbacks pick in the draft. I don't think that he's going to fall to 24 because of, the way that he played in the combine. So if the Saints end up trying to get Jordan Love, they're going to possibly have to move up to maybe in the teens to try to snatch him up, because he really did a good job. I think he ran maybe like a late 4.5, 4.6, in the 40-yard dash. So he's going to be a player, man. He's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going to go after. They're not, turned off at the fact that he threw 17 interceptions this past season. I think they look at like the team that he played with and also the talent that he had around him. So I think that's going to not play, a big factor, the fact that he turned the ball over so many times. Teams are really going to try to take a gamble on him, especially if he's getting compared to guys like a Patrick Mahomes. And as far as the tight end position, Brayson Hopkins is a guy that stood out to me. This guy is a guy that I feel like is going to be a really good tight end. Steven Sullivan, he ran a 4.6. These guys were, these are some really good tight ends. And one thing about some of these tight ends that they have in this year's draft, not only can they catch the ball, but some of them are really good blockers. And one guy, he did not perform, but I feel like a guy that's going to stand out is Thaddeus Moss. Now, he did do he did get a physical, and they found out that he had a fracture in his right foot. And, I don't think it's going to cost him or anything like that. I don't think it's going to hurt his draft stock, because one thing about Thaddeus Moss is that he's a really good blocker. And this might even play into the Saints' hand due to the fact that he's going to have to get surgery on his right foot. It's going to take probably a max of 12 weeks in order for him to recover. So a lot of teams may look at that and might get turned off from it, and he might fall into the hands of the New Orleans Saints. A lot of people aren't talking about Thaddeus Moss because he's not the prototypical tight end, a guy that's like 6'5", 6'6", 250 pounds. Thaddeus Moss is like 6'1", maybe like 240. But one thing that he does really well, he's a really good blocker. And it can really help in a run game, especially since the Saints are trying to improve their running game this season. Well, at least that's what Sean Payton is saying. So if you want to improve your running game, you want to get yourself a tight end that can not only catch the ball, but also help in the running game as well. But that's what I thought about day one of the NFL Combine. And I would love to hear from you. What do you think about the NFL Combine? Did anybody change your mind? Did anybody that you looked at that was like, man, this could possibly be a New Orleans Saint? I can see myself cheering for this guy. Comment down below, like and share this video. This has been the State of the Saints podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com, search The State of the Saints podcast. Also, the State of the Game podcast that's available on YouTube, youtube.com, search The State of the Game. And both are available on social media at Facebook. On facebook.com, search The State of the Saints and the State of the Game podcast. Till next time, all I got to say is, who dat?